Okay, so you've sent over some really fascinating stuff for this deep dive. And I especially wanted to talk about this YouTube English lesson you sent. The fact that they're using COVID-19 as their conversation topic. Talk about timely learning. It really highlights how the pandemic sort of became this global touchstone, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's remarkable how this seemingly simple language lesson, it sort of unveils the pandemic's ripple effect on our lives, from the everyday to the global scale.
Yeah, and right from the start, they jump into discussing like the virus's transmission, how rapidly it spreads, especially in crowded places,
Mm.
and the sheer range of symptoms that people were experiencing. It's kind of a stark reminder of those early days of uncertainty.
Hmm.
I remember feeling like we were constantly playing catch up with the latest information.
Oh, absolutely. And that uncertainty itself was a huge factor in the global response.
Okay.
The speakers even used the phrase prevention is better than cure, which really became a defining principle in those initial months.
Yeah.
The unknown aspects of the virus, its unpredictable nature, that really amplified fear and anxiety worldwide.
It's almost like this English lesson inadvertently turns into a time capsule. You know what I mean?
Totally.
It captures the anxieties of that period because they talk about how frightening it was, some people getting severely ill, needing hospitalization. It really brings it home.
And tragically, for millions, it wasn't just about getting sick.
Right.
The global death toll was staggering, reaching millions, and it underscored the harsh reality that this wasn't just a severe flu season,
Yeah.
but a global health crisis, unlike anything we'd seen in modern
Yeah,
times.
you can sense that weight in their words. Even as they're trying to navigate English grammar,
Yeah.
like the pandemic forms this inescapable backdrop to their lives. But what really struck me was how they weave in those everyday struggles too. Job losses, financial strain. It's subtle, but it's there.
Because that's the crux of it, isn't it? The
Yeah.
pandemic's impact. It wasn't confined to physical health. It triggered a global economic earthquake. Countless businesses shuttered. People lost their livelihoods. And often, the most vulnerable populations, those in low-income jobs, essential workers, they were hit the hardest.
Absolutely. And it makes you think about the mental and emotional toll as well. Something the speakers touch on, the loneliness, the anxiety. It wasn't just about the virus itself, but the isolation, the fear of the unknown, the disruption to our routines, our support systems.
Precisely. The pandemic acted like a magnifying glass on existing social issues, from economic disparities to the need for robust mental health support. It forced a reckoning with these systemic challenges that had been simmering beneath the surface.
And yet, amidst all this hardship, there's this incredible thread of resilience that shines through. The speakers mentioned volunteer work, food banks, people coming together to support their communities. It's heartening, isn't it? To
Mhm.
see that even in the darkest of times, that human spirit of compassion and action can prevail.
It is truly inspiring. Crises often reveal our deepest strengths, both on an individual and a collective level. We witnessed incredible acts of courage from frontline workers, but also countless everyday heroes who looked out for their neighbors, demonstrating that human connection can flourish even in the most challenging circumstances.
And it wasn't just about like community support either.
Yeah.
Think about how they were talking about education.
Hmm.
Like the whole system got turned upside down. Schools abruptly closing. And then you have all these students at risk of falling behind.
Yeah.
Yet almost overnight, there was this massive shift to online learning.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, wow, is this going to change everything?
It certainly did, in both positive and challenging ways. I mean, the rapid adoption of online learning, it really exposed a significant digital divide.
Yeah.
Access to laptops, reliable internet,
Yeah.
even just a quiet place to study. Those weren't givens for every student.
Right.
So while some flourished in the virtual classroom, others struggled to even log on. And that just further exacerbated those existing inequalities in education that we always talk about.
Yeah, it's like the pandemic didn't create these inequalities, but it
Golly.
definitely like put a spotlight on them. It made it impossible to ignore.
Exactly.
But like you said, there was also incredible innovation.
I'm thinking about how the speakers mentioned how some schools are still incorporating those changes they made even after returning to in-person learning. Absolutely. It speaks to the idea that necessity often breeds invention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Educators were forced to adapt, to experiment with new tools and teaching methods. And what's so fascinating is that some of these adaptations might actually have a lasting positive impact. We might see a future where education is more flexible, more accessible, thanks in part to the lessons learned during those really tumultuous times.
You know what I find so fascinating is how this conversation, which starts with a virus, right?
Right.
It keeps circling back to human connection.
Yeah.
You talk about checking in on friends,
Yeah.
being there for family, even just simple phone calls taking on new significance. It's like the pandemic.
Mm.
It underscored our fundamental need for connection, even when we were physically apart.
Precisely. It's a potent reminder that social support, that sense of belonging and shared experience, it's essential, particularly during times of isolation and uncertainty. Small acts of kindness, reaching out to loved ones. These little things became lifelines for many people.
Even like they mentioned how Lily's father contracted COVID
So,
and how she's been caring for him, providing support. It's a small detail,
right.
but it really personalizes the experience. It showcases how this virus, it rippled through families, impacting relationships in really profound ways.
Absolutely, Lily's story. It reminds us that within those global statistics, within the grand narrative of the pandemic, there were millions of individual stories, personal struggles, and incredible acts of love and resilience within families and communities.
It's like this constant tension between the global and the deeply personal, would you
Hmm.
say?
Hmm.
This global crisis playing out in these very real, very human ways. And, it's amazing how even while they're dealing with these huge challenges, they still find ways to contribute. Like they
Mm-hmm.
talk about volunteering, fundraising, trying to help those hit hardest by the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. It really highlights that innate human capacity for empathy and collective action,
Yeah.
especially when, the systems themselves are strained.
Right.
Like in the face of these immense challenges, we saw countless examples of mutual aid, of people stepping up to fill the gaps and care for one another. It's a good reminder that even amidst these global crises, even when our own individual lives are sort of upended, we still have that power to make a difference.
Yeah. And those stories often, I don't know, they get overshadowed by the headlines sometimes.
Yeah.
Get so caught up in the daily news cycle, the statistics.
Yeah.
But at its heart, the pandemic really has been a story about people.
It is a story about us, how we as individuals and as a global community respond to an unprecedented event. And that's what's, I think, so compelling about this English lesson. It's not just about language acquisition. It's a window into how people were processing this global upheaval in real time, trying to make sense of it through their own experiences.
It's amazing, isn't it? They're learning a new language,
Mm.
but at the same time, they're grappling with these really universal themes: fear, resilience, the power of human connection. It's like this unexpected but really profound reflection on the human condition, all woven into this YouTube English lesson.
It really is. And it reminds us that these experiences, however challenging, they're part of our collective human story. We adapted, we innovated, we found strength in unexpected places. And those lessons, those acts of resilience and compassion, they continue to shape us, to redefine what it means to navigate an increasingly complex world.
Right. So if we're thinking about what we can take away from all of this today, it really is that even something as simple as an English lesson
Mhm.
could offer these really profound insights into the human experience. I mean, we've seen how the pandemic impacted health economics, education, but I think perhaps most importantly, we've seen those extraordinary ways that people adapted, how they supported each other,
Mm.
and ultimately found ways to persevere.
It's a really poignant reflection on our shared journey through this global crisis, and it really prompts us to consider our own experiences, the lessons we learn, how we can carry forward that spirit of resilience and connection, not just in the face of adversity,
Yeah,
but in our everyday lives.
absolutely. And on that note, until next time.